The world is not only stranger than we suppose, it is stranger than we can suppose. And this is something that we have not entertained very seriously as a possibility. The assumption has always been that man's mind is sufficient for the cognition of the cosmos. It is not all that surprising when you think about the fact that as recently as, let's say, 1830, people believed the Earth was 4,000 years old. As recently as 1480, conventional knowledge held that, the Eurasian landmass in connection with Africa, that was it. So when we look back into our recent past, we discover tremendous epistemic naivete. That means people didn't know what was going on. They weren't even close. And yet we are asked to believe that somewhere after Darwin and before now, it was all figured out. And now we view the universe from a lofty pinnacle of integrated understanding. This deep insight into how everything works has left everything a mess. And what does that mean about us? Why is that? And what can be done about it? Well, I think the problem is that we have too long ignored the possibility that reality is stranger than we can suppose. It's not to be explained. And we have chosen to operate with the assumption that we can understand, that the human mind can in fact grok larger and larger levels of embeddedness and make sense of them. We have the means present at hand to completely explode this nonsensical fiction of certitude. And yet we choose not to confront it, because the answer about how you understand the universe is the same answer that you get when you ask the question, how am I to understand my own life? It can't be understood. It is a receding mystery. It is a continuing carrot. It cannot be brought under the aegis of rational apprehension, because apprehension is the primitive functioning of the primate neural network. And reality, who knows? You do not measure the depth of a universal mystery with the neural network of a primate. Our role is not to understand, but to appreciate. If you don't know what's going on at a dinner party, in a corporation, in an environment, then the best course is to keep your mouth shut and pay attention and try to appreciate the situation. It's ridiculous to attempt to seize the tiller of reality because we don't even know where we want to go. So the notion that by creating these models of reality which are not acknowledged as models, but which are called scientific truth, we betray ourselves down the primrose path that leads to dreary, dusty death. Because what we do is we take the poetry out of being. We extract the poetry from being by the assumption of the mundane. Nature is something from which we torment her secrets. Once nature is taken as the ground of being, then the permission to inflate the image of the ego is denied. And I think that this is happening globally very slowly, under pressure, under duress, because our backs are to the wall. We are seeing a planetary crisis unfold before our eyes. Well, so what I'm offering as a counterpoise to that is this notion of provisional models. Nature is not mute. Nature is full of affection and intentionality toward humankind. But intuition must be given prominence in the rearrangement of our relationship with the world. And most of us are accustomed to thinking of intuition as something feminine, mysterious, unexplainable, and sort of magical. And also, I think, because we live in a male-dominant society, we undervalue it. If someone claims intuition, our position is probably one of prove it. But there's an interesting thing about intuition that I don't think many people understand or have bothered to look at, which is mathematics is based on intuition. Now, half of mathematics would rise with a screech of horror at this statement. But the other half of mathematics calls itself intuitional mathematics. If we talk about what is called pure mathematics, which is the great love of mathematicians, the other kind of mathematics is applied mathematics, and that's for engineers and technologists. But if we think about pure mathematics, it is an activity carried on in the mind, based on deductive truth. All grays are non-X. This is just a statement. We don't yet know what this is going to be about. What we're putting in place are a set of statements that appear nonsensical. But what we will assert is that we should seek a relationship between them, and that will then show us something. And this is how mathematics really works. It has very little to do with number. It has to do with the conceptualizing of relationships, and then exploring your intuition about these conceptions. And then the third and very late stage is you write a formal statement of your cognitive activity around these assumptions. So you see, mathematics is entirely intuitional. It leaves no track. It is drawn from this other domain. Well, why has it been appropriated by science? Mathematics has been appropriated by science because mathematics has an uncanny ability to describe nature. Notice that mathematics is an intuitional activity. An intuitional activity describes nature. The deeper description of nature is achieved by taking weird objects from the frontiers of mathematics, these things dreamed up in the confines and depths of the human mind and inside computers, and then laying them over nature and seeing, my gosh, there's a one-to-one correspondence between, let us say, the multidimensional catastrophes described by René Thom and the dripping of a faucet, the turbulence in a brook, the voting patterns in a ghetto. All of these things are seen to be easily modeled by extremely exotic mathematical objects discovered through intuition within the mind. Well, what does this mean? Well, it means, if it means anything, it must be that the unaided human mind is more capable of correctly modeling nature than the human mind that works through the methodological inductive approach called science. A scientific description of this room would say very little about all the important things going on in it. A scientific description of this room would leave out personality, would leave out linguistic intent, the uniqueness of each of us. For science, we are merely members of the human species. Again, this flattening, this reductionism, this betrayal of the quintessence of the phenomenon in a desperate effort to achieve closure in the modeling process. And so then you do achieve closure, but the model is always inadequate. It's always inadequate. So then there's this sense of frustration. We can't get closure with the model unless we tell a lie, unless we deny the complexity, the interrelatedness, the soulness, the spiritness, the mindfulness. All of these things are, for science, what are called secondary properties. They are only an aspect of your point of view, like an iridescence on a butterfly's wing or something like that. In fact, that is the classic reductionist definition of consciousness. It is an iridescence that appears on the surface of neural processing that we mistake for true being. And yet somehow we are embedded within this iridescence, and it is from within this iridescence that we launch the descriptive models that then deny our existential validity.